fam, welcome back. It is so good to be with you guys again online. And tonight we are starting a new series called Subject to Change, because let's be real for a second, life has changed a ton this past month. And it's bound to continue to change. Even as we are beginning to move towards getting back to normal, it's bound to be different when this whole thing is over. And so I want to talk about that. I want us to have a chance to talk about how do we react to that? How do we make it through all this change that has happened and will continue to happen? And so I want to start things off by talking about something everyone is really into: terms and conditions. Okay, actually, that's probably never been on your mind, but you've definitely seen them. Well, sort of, even if you didn't realize it. See, you know when you download an app to your phone or computer and you get a pop-up message asking you if you agree to their terms and conditions? Well, that's it. Do you read it? No, no one does. And so we do what everyone does, right? We select agree and move along. Why? Well, they're crazy long, right? Instagram's terms alone, for example, are 5,000 words long. Nobody got time for that. But fortunately, there's one person who did make time for it. This lawyer who decided to read through Instagram's list and spell out their terms in plain English for the rest of us who don't have that kind of time and aren't lawyers. And so here are a few highlights. First, other people might pay us, that's Instagram, to use your pictures, but we won't actually pay you. Or how about this one? And we may randomly delete your posts. And we can force you to give up your username for any reason. And finally, we may share your personal information with other companies. So, in short, Instagram's kind of creepy. But here's the craziest part. All of these terms, they're not set in stone. The terms are subject to change. In other words, Instagram is saying, here are the rules. Here's how we do things. Got all that? Okay, great. By the way, this can all change tomorrow. And that's kind of weird, right? Instagram made the rules, but they also hold the right to break those rules. They want it both ways. Not cool. But it's not just the terms and conditions and apps that are subject to change. Life is subject to change. I mean, we all know that, again, just based on these past couple of weeks, this past month and a half, but it's obvious. And it's really obvious when you think about it. We have all these terms and conditions or expectations for what life should look like. And then one day, life completely rearranges things on us. It breaks the rules and does the unexpected. But here's the thing. Change can be good or bad. I mean, for example, many of you probably, let's just be real, have experienced some body changes in the past weeks, years, months, and for some of you that may mean, oh man, I'm taller all of a sudden, or I feel stronger, but then for some of us, there's acne. Nah. Or maybe this past year you've made a really great new friend, but at the same time you've also lost a friend because of a misunderstanding or something that can't be fixed. Or maybe some of you have discovered a new relationship, that new bae, and you're excited about the possibilities of that, and you've entered into it, and it's a good conversations and all this, but then on the other side of that, some of you may have experienced a breakup. Or how about what we're going through right now? Some of you at first may have felt like, man, no school? I got all this time, and now you're feeling pretty bored. Or on one side of the coin, there's so much more free time, and you have so much time to do you, or spend more time in the things that you didn't feel like you had before, or play more of that video game, or do more of that hobby. But on the other side of it, you're missing time with friends. Or for some of you, it's great that you have more time with family, and then for others, it's not so great that you have more time with family. See, change can be awesome, or it can be awful. But either way, regardless of where you're at in the middle of what's going on or things that you've experienced this past year, I think we all struggle with change for a couple of reasons. First, it forces us into the unknown. See, the new, whatever's coming, the new could be awesome, but we don't know yet. Changes don't arrive with a guaranteed set of terms and conditions. So until we know how things turn out, it can be pretty stressful. And secondly, we lose perspective. Change can be emotional. In fact, if it's big enough, like right now, it can feel like it's the end of the world. But it's moments like this that it causes us to realize we are not in control. I mean, if you think about it, really think about it. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to control our outcomes. But then just think about everything you were doing before this epidemic. I mean, all the things that maybe you did or I did to take control of our situation, like studying to make good grades, or practicing for sports or instruments or hobbies, or taking all the right electives so you can get into the right college, or practicing through all the right things to say to impress your friends or that girl or guy you've been crushing on, or we do everything we can to avoid arguments with friends or family. And now all that's changed. Everything looks different. All that stuff that we were doing to have control doesn't really feel like we have control anymore. And then what we realize is that although we never really had control of our lives, we feel it more deeply when we're in the middle of change. And since all of us are subject to change at some point, we're all subject to realizing that we can't make everything in life fit into a nice, perfect box. And so the question we need to tackle through this series and right now isn't how do we avoid change? Because change is happening, whether we're ready for it or not. The real question is, how can we make it through change? And so that's what I want to talk about tonight first. Again, as always, there's going to be some discussion questions on the screen. Check them out and share your thoughts in the chat. So, how can we make it through change? Fortunately, we aren't the only ones to have asked this question. But before we get there, I want to give you some backstory. See, thousands of years ago, God chose a group of people, the Israelites or the Jews, to be his people. And although God is perfect, the Jewish people weren't. But despite that, God still wanted them to live differently than every other people group in the world. So he gave them a set of laws, or terms and conditions, on how to live great lives while setting themselves apart. And these laws started with 10, but it eventually became 613 laws. I mean, that's a lot to keep track of. I mean, they had laws for just about every part of life, like what to eat and not to eat, what to wear and not to wear, how to worship God. And some of those rules for worship stated that only certain people could enter the inner part of the temple, which was like their church. And only a smaller elite group could actually experience God's presence. So the rules for worship were rigid, to say the least. Now, fast forward a few centuries to when something revolutionary happened. We talked about it last week. God entered the world as a real flesh and blood person, Jesus. And he shared the amazing truth that his love wasn't just for the Jewish people, but for the whole world. And then after being put to death and demonstrating just how great his love was, Jesus came back to life and defeated death. And it was at this moment that everything changed. It was game-changing. It was history-making. But then Jesus left. And once life returned to somewhat normal, the Jewish people who had become followers of Jesus were shook. Their religion, which they had faithfully practiced every day for generations, went from 613 rules to 1. To say they had concerns was an understatement. So a letter was sent to address them. It's called Hebrews. And it was written to Jewish people who followed Jesus. And while we're not sure who wrote it, the author clearly had a deep understanding of God's plan for his people and mankind. And as this letter is ending, the author is writing his final thoughts, and he makes this statement. In Hebrews 13:5, we read this: "Don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you." So that may seem like a weird thing to hear now, but it made sense at the time. Being a Jewish Jesus follower back then wasn't easy. One of the changes that came along with following Jesus meant you were in danger of losing property and money. You could literally lose everything. But even with the scary threat of potential change like this, the author reminds Jewish believers of something they already knew to be true because they'd heard it all their lives. God would never abandon or fail them. Basically, the writer here is saying, hey, a lot is changing, and I get that, but God's character hasn't changed at all. And so the writer continues a few verses later, and he makes a similar statement that I think could help us all amidst the change we're facing right now. And so he says this in Hebrews 13:8. He says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. In other words, even though Jesus had changed the game, Jesus himself had not changed. He was the representation of the same God they had been following since they first encountered him. Sure, the way they lived and worshipped was changing in a major way. Instead of following hundreds of rules, they were now free to simply follow one person, Jesus. And so that meant worship, no more rules about who could go where in the temple. Experiencing God, his Spirit was now available to everyone. And sacrifices, forget about it. In one move, Jesus became the singular, permanent sacrifice for everyone's sin. And to us, those changes may seem like no big deal. Like, well, duh, like that's how you do things. But to the Jewish people at the time, they were unsettling. Remember, in the middle of change, you have no clue how things are going to turn out. You don't know if it's going to be good or bad. And that's why the writer of Hebrews reminds the Jewish believers that even though a lot is changing, they could trust that Jesus himself does not change. He wasn't some random guy showing up to break their system. He was the same God who was present when the system was created. And that's a big deal because they had a history with God. They had experienced ups and downs with him. They had experienced God's faithfulness through tough times in their past. And the same God they or their ancestors had trusted in the past was the same God they could trust now. Their circumstances had changed, but God's character hadn't changed one bit. And so in short, what the author was trying to tell them is something that very much still applies to you and I today, and very much applies to us in the middle of what we're facing right now. And that's this: life changes, God doesn't. I mean, just think about how freeing that is. Because while everything around you may be changing and is going to change, in fact, it's subject to change, and it may make you feel out of control, you can still walk with the one who is actually in control. Jesus is a friend who never changes. He was good thousands of years ago, and he's still good today. Your circumstances will change, but his character never will. And so let's take another moment to talk about that. Again, as normal, there's going to be some questions for you on the screen. Take your thoughts to the chat. All right, fam, bring it back. Real talk. Change is tough. But for me, remembering that although life changes, God doesn't, helps give me the peace and confidence to make it through. And the best way to remember this truth is to keep it in front of you. Here's what I mean. See, Amy used to do ballet. She was super into dance and did it all the time. I mean, Anthony, you'll probably remember when she was showing you some of that stuff and you were like spinning around, and there was something she had to learn to be able to do that. Because dancers obviously move and spin around a lot. And when they do that, if they don't, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm moving and spinning, if you've ever been on one of those spinning rides, you get dizzy and like sick, and obviously they don't want to, and so they have this trick that helps them stay stable and balanced. See, they find a section of the wall they're facing, and as they're dancing, they keep looking at that spot. Otherwise, like we just talked about, they'll get dizzy and disoriented. And this focus keeps them balanced in the right direction. The same is true of an ice skater. When they do crazy spins, like when you watch the Winter Olympics, that give, and those spins like give you motion sickness just by watching, they do the same thing. They keep their eyes on a single spot. So even though it looks out of control, they remain stable. And the same idea holds true for us. Life moves fast and things can change quickly, which makes it incredibly easy for us to feel out of control. And when that happens, and we shift our focus to our problems, things feel worse. Like you're getting dizzy and you throw up. Like they just get worse. And in these moments, we tend to forget how God has shown up in the past. And as a result, we lose perspective. It's important that we stay focused on the one who can stabilize us and keep us balanced. So, how do we do that? If you think back, I bet you can remember a specific time when God came through for you. Maybe it was when your family didn't have enough money and you prayed for help to get through it. Or maybe he was there when a dating relationship ended and he helped you survive. Or maybe he's helped calm your anxiety from time to time. Or maybe he answered a really important prayer. Take some time to think about that. Think through your past and come up with a few specific memories of how God stayed the same when life didn't. And once you do, once you remember that moment or time that he showed up, write it down. And then keep it in front of you. Because doing this reminds you that God has shown up in the past, and it will encourage you to know that he's still the same today. So write it down. Put it as a note in a place where you'll see it daily. Like write it on a sticky note, slap it onto your bathroom mirror, or in your room somewhere, on your, like if you have a desk or a dresser, or Grayson, I know you got all those shoes hanging on your wall. Maybe throw it on your favorite box or your shoe box or whatever, or maybe it goes in the Notes app on your phone, wherever you're going to see it most. And that may feel lame, but seeing these reminders every day will help keep you seeing things clearly when life feels like it's spinning out of control. And so here's what I want to do. Let's take a moment to do just that. We're going to, again, there's going to be some prompts or questions on the screen. And so check those out. Take this time to write those things down and then share your thoughts in the chat. Wow. Thanks for sharing, fam. I encourage each of you to keep those in front of you this week. But before we go, I want to point out one final thing to you because this is so cool. In this letter to the Hebrews that we just read, we find an important truth, right? Life changes, God doesn't. But here's the cool part, and I loved when I noticed this. Right in the middle of this, we also find what that really means for us. Sandwiched between the two statements we read earlier, this is what the author of Hebrews tells us in 13:6. He says this, "So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me?" Basically, what we're being told is that despite the change we may experience, because of the truth that God doesn't change, we can say with confidence, God is my helper, so I have nothing to fear. People, they got nothing on me. This virus has got nothing on me. This world has got nothing on me because God's got me. Listen, change is going to happen. Some of it's going to be good, and some of it won't. But even though life is unpredictable, we can always trust in the one who is predictable. Life changes. God doesn't. He's the same loving God that he's always been. And so I want to encourage you. Think of some of the areas in your life right now where you can begin to lean on this reality. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's your family, your fam, a memory, a relationship, or even reading our daily Devo that we've been going through this series. Because you can't avoid change, but you can make it through it. And you will. This season will pass. And if you lean on this truth, you will make it through. Because even though life changes, God doesn't. Let's pray. Father, man, my good God, our King, our Lord, our Savior, our good Father, our loyal friend, our trusted guide, God, we are so thankful for you. I am so thankful for you. Things are definitely changing around us. They have changed, and they're going to continue to change. And that can seem crazy at times. And I imagine for my fam on the other side of this screen, there's been moments these past couple weeks, this past month, that they've definitely felt that, God. And so I'm just so thankful for the truth that even though amidst our change, you don't. We can lean on you, God. That gives me so much confidence. And I pray for my fam on the other side of this screen that they would be given that confidence as well, that they would be given that peace, God, that they would know they can turn to you and depend on you. And that as a family can depend on one another. I pray that they're reminded right now, through this message that you have given us, through your word in the book of Hebrews, that you don't change, you are constant. And that this season will pass, but you will remain the same. Thank you, God. We love you. In your name, amen. All right, fam, before you go, I just want to let you know a couple more things. And first off, I just want to say, I hope this is encouraging for you. I know it's been for me as I've been studying through this and being reminded that God doesn't change, even though life does. And this has been especially helpful as I've been reading in our Devo this week. Anthony, Manuel, Jared, Amy, it's been so awesome reading in that together and being able to share comments and thoughts. And I can't encourage the rest of you enough to join that Devo. Be reminded through these next couple weeks of the truth that God doesn't change and how we respond to that in the midst of change. But even beyond that, I'm also super excited for what's coming up this week. You probably heard about it. We have a United Night online. And guys, oh my gosh, it has been so much fun filming that, and I can't wait for you guys to be a part of it. And so again, that's Friday, April 24th, 7 p.m. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. We're getting together with the whole fam. It's going to be a blast. And then after that, I'm so excited because we were talking, Jeff, Caleb, Adam, we were all chatting like, how can we stay more connected during this whole thing? And so one of the first steps we're taking to that is we're going to have a game day on Saturday. We're going to be doing Minecraft and Smash and Fortnite, and we'll be letting you know the details of that. But be ready for it. Be sharing your gamer tags. We're going to be letting you know where to hook up so we can all play together and continue to stay connected. And we're going to keep thinking of ways that we can try to help you guys do that, because again, during this time, we may not be able to be physically present with each other, but we can still have a presence in each other's life. And it's moments like this where we need to keep doing that, and we need it the most. And so I'm looking forward to hanging with you guys in the Zoom room. We'll see you there. I'm sharing the Zoom link now, so click that. We'll see you there. Can't wait to keep hanging out and connecting with you guys. Love you.